The story of Makhachev's rising storm, the 2020 victories over Davi Ramos and Drew Dober. Picture this: the crowd is buzzing, the lights are flashing, and the air is electric with anticipation. You're about to witness a fighter on the brink of greatness, a man whose skills are quiet, almost understated, yet brutally effective. This is Islam Makhachev, and the year's 2020. The UFC world has begun to take notice, but the real magic has yet to happen. It all begins with two victories, two critical stepping stones on a path that would eventually make Makhachev one of the most feared lightweights in MMA. The first act, Islam Makhachev vs. Davi Ramos, UFC Fight Night, July 25, 2020. Let's set the stage for the first act. The opponent, Davi Ramos, a Brazilian grappling specialist, known for his slick submission skills and jiu-jitsu prowess. Ramos had earned respect in the UFC for his grappling pedigree, but now he was about to face the wrestling and striking machine that was Makhachev. Makhachev had already won 4 of his previous 5 UFC fights, but there was still a sense that his potential was yet untapped. This fight against Davi Ramos was not just another win. It was an opportunity to prove that Islam wasn't just riding on the coattails of his mentor, the legendary Khabib Nurmagomedov. This was his time to shine. As the fight began, the difference in wrestling was immediately apparent. Makhachev, like a shadow, stalked Ramos, slowly suffocating him with pressure. Ramos tried to use his jiu-jitsu to control the ground game, but Makhachev was a step ahead. His defensive grappling was superb, never giving Ramos the slightest opening for a submission. Islam's stand-up was a different level, too sharp, measured, and technical. Makhachev didn't need wild strikes. Every jab, every right hand was calculated. Ramos had no answers for the pressure Makhachev was putting on him. Islam kept pushing, putting his opponent against the cage, controlling the pace and position with calm confidence. By the end of the 3 rounds, Makhachev had done more than enough to claim the decision. The judges' scorecards were unanimous. Islam had outclassed the Brazilian in every facet. It wasn't a thrilling, fireworks-filled knockout, but it was dominant, and it showed the world that Makhachev had a different style, one built on suffocating pressure, intelligent striking, and near immovable grappling. The second act, Islam Makhachev vs. Drew Dober, UFC Fight Night, March 14, 2020. Fast forward a few months to March 14, 2020, Makhachev is back. This time, his opponent is Drew Dober, a fan favorite and a dangerous striker who had built a reputation for knocking out his opponents with thunderous punches. Dober had been on a solid run, winning 4 out of his last 5, and was riding high into this fight, thinking he could outstrike Makhachev. But Islam, like a storm on the horizon, was preparing to wipe out Dober's hopes. From the opening bell, Makhachev's methodical attack was like watching a master painter at work. He controlled the center of the octagon, forcing Dober to move backwards. Dober's striking, which had been so lethal in past bouts, seemed impotent against Makhachev's reach and defensive movement. Islam wasn't just dodging. He was reading Dober like a book, anticipating every strike with surgical precision. Makhachev wasn't just surviving. He was thriving. With every takedown, he demonstrated his wrestling dominance, stifling Dober's attempts to scramble. Once Islam had Dober on the ground, it was a display of pure control. Dober struggled, but his efforts to escape were futile as Makhachev smothered him with relentless pressure. But it wasn't all about the ground game. Islam's striking was smooth, crisp, and technical. A well-timed left hand caught Dober clean, and though Drew was durable, the writing was on the wall. Islam wasn't just a grappler, he was a complete fighter. The rounds went by, and Makhachev's superior cardio, strategy, and control were undeniable. At the end of 3 rounds, the unanimous decision was clear: Islam Makhachev had dominated once again. It wasn't a spectacular knockout, but it was another victory that showed he was the real deal. The man behind the victory, Makhachev's mentality and strategy. Now, to fully understand the significance of these victories, let's take a step back and delve into the mindset of Islam Makhachev. Often overshadowed by his legendary teammate Khabib Nurmagomedov, Islam had a point to prove in 2020. His style was a mirror of Khabib's in many ways, a relentless grappler with exceptional control on the ground and a growing striking game. But there was something distinct about Islam's rise, his composure and calm approach. While Khabib's presence in the cage often felt like a force of nature, Makhachev's demeanor was almost zen-like. His approach was meticulous, surgical. He didn't waste energy. Every movement, every takedown, every strike was done with purpose. That is what made him such a dangerous opponent. As Khabib was winding down his career, Makhachev was quietly climbing, knocking down opponents one by one. The controversies, the quiet storms struggle for recognition. But it wasn't all smooth sailing for Islam Makhachev in 2020. Even with the 2 impressive victories, the cloud of comparison to Khabib loomed large. Many questioned whether Makhachev could ever escape the shadow of his friend and mentor. UFC fans, still enamored with Khabib's undefeated streak, couldn't help but ask, is Makhachev really a future champion, or is he just another product of Khabib's tutelage? Even UFC matchmakers were hesitant to give Makhachev the big spotlight. Despite his skill, he wasn't getting the major fights. His performance was often overlooked by the mainstream. When it came to securing bigger opportunities, Makhachev had to contend with not just the pressure of his performances, but the public perception of his legacy being linked to Khabib's. But Makhachev remained unfazed. He knew that his time would come. Islam wasn't trying to replicate Khabib's journey. He was forging his own path, step by step, fight by fight. The outcome, the calm before the storm. So, as we reflect on those victories over Davi Ramos and Drew Dober, remember this: Islam Makhachev wasn't just winning for the sake of victory. He was building his legacy, showing the world that he wasn't just Khabib's protege, he was a force of nature in his own right. And while some doubted him, the fight world would soon learn what those who knew Makhachev already understood. This was a fighter destined for greatness. It wasn't about flash or instant fame. It was about the quiet, methodical dismantling of opponents. It was about stacking wins, one after the other, until no one could ignore him anymore. And when Islam finally gets his title shot, the world will know it was a long time coming.